Have you ever been humiliated by someone who was supposed to protect you? I was 32 years old, standing in line at a small grocery store 3 blocks from my childhood home, holding a basket with bread, milk, and eggs. Simple things. The kind of things you don't think twice about. My father was behind me. He'd asked to come along. Said he wanted to spend time together. I thought maybe, after all these years, something had softened between us. The cashier scanned the items. $12.43. I handed her my card. She swiped it once, declined. She tried again, slower this time. Like maybe the machine had made a mistake. Declined. I felt the heat rise in my chest. That specific kind of heat that comes when you know people are watching. The line behind us was growing. A woman with a toddler. An older man with a newspaper. I could feel their eyes. But it was my father's voice I heard, loud enough for everyone. Of course it didn't work. You've always been useless with money. Useless with everything, really. He said it like he was commenting on the weather. Casual, matter of fact, like my failure was so expected it didn't even warrant emotion. The cashier looked down. The woman behind us shifted her weight. I stood there, frozen, holding that declined card in my hand, feeling every inch of myself shrink. I was 32. But in that moment I was 12 again, 15 again, 20 again. Every age I'd ever been when he made me feel like I was never quite enough. I paid with cash I found crumpled in my jacket pocket. I walked out without looking at anyone. My father followed, silent now, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just carved out a piece of my dignity in front of strangers. But that was only the beginning. Before I tell you why that moment changed everything, let me take you back. Let me show you who I was before that grocery store. Before the uniform, before the Admiral. Before I understood that silence can be both a prison and a choice. I grew up in a house that smelled like coffee and disappointment. My father was a mechanical engineer. Brilliant, everyone said. He could fix anything except the distance between us. My mother was a school teacher who spoke in whispers, as if the world might shatter if she used her full voice. I learned early that love in our house came with conditions. Good grades. Clean room. Perfect behavior. And even then, it was never quite enough. I remember being 8 years old, bringing home a math test. 94 out of 100. I was so proud. I ran all the way home, my backpack bouncing against my shoulders, because I couldn't wait to show him. He looked at it for maybe 3 seconds. What happened to the other 6 points? That was all he said. No smile, no good job, just that question hanging in the air like smoke. I learned to stop showing him my victories. I learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less. Have you ever felt something like this? That specific ache of wanting someone to be proud of you and knowing they never will be? By the time I was 18, I'd become an expert at disappearing. I went to community college because it was practical. Studied nursing because it was respectable. Dated a man my father approved of because approval felt like oxygen and I was suffocating. I thought if I did everything right, eventually I'd feel right. But there's a difference between doing and being. I was doing everything, being nothing. The nursing program was harder than I expected, not the science. I love the science. The biology, the chemistry, the way the human body was just this impossible, beautiful machine. But the hours, the exhaustion, the way you had to hold people's pain without letting it drown you. I worked night shifts at a veterans hospital to pay for school. That's where I first saw them. The men and women in uniform who came through our doors. Some with visible wounds. Some with invisible ones. I remember this one Marine. Couldn't have been more than 23, 24 years old. Shrapnel wounds across his back. He never complained. Never asked for extra medication. Just stared at the ceiling like he was watching a movie only he could see. One night, during my rounds, he asked me, "Do you ever feel like you're supposed to be somewhere else?" I didn't know how to answer, but I felt it. God, I felt it. I finished nursing school at 25. My father came to the graduation. Stood in the back. Left before the ceremony ended. My mother said he had work. I said nothing. What was there to say? I'd learned by then that some disappointments are so old they become part of the architecture. You build your life around them. I worked at that veterans hospital for 3 more years. Good job, steady, safe. I was engaged to the man my father approved of. His name was Michael. He worked in finance. He was kind in that absent way some people are kind, where they're never cruel, but never really present, either. We planned a small wedding. His mother wanted orchids. My mother wanted roses. I wanted to disappear, but I didn't. I just kept moving forward because forward was the only direction I knew. And that was the moment I stopped being who they thought I was. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were always slow in the emergency wing. I was restocking supplies when I heard the commotion. A recruiter had set up a table in the hospital cafeteria. Navy, they did it sometimes, quiet recruitment drives. Talking to veterans about continuing their service, talking to staff about opportunities. I don't know what made me stop. Maybe it was the uniform. Maybe it was the way the recruiter, a woman about my age, stood so straight it looked like she'd been built from a different blueprint than the rest of us. Maybe it was just that I was tired of being tired. I walked over. She looked up, smiled. "Can I help you?" I almost walked away. Almost. Instead, I heard myself say, "Tell me about the nurse corps. Stay with me until the end. It's worth it." She told me about officer candidate school, about serving on ships, on bases, in places I'd only seen on maps, about being part of something bigger. I listened, and for the first time in years, I felt something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, opening, like a window that had been painted shut, finally giving way. I applied that week. Didn't tell anyone. Not Michael, not my mother. Certainly not my father. The application process took months. Medical exams, background checks, interviews. Every step I waited for someone to tell me I wasn't good enough, but they didn't. In fact, they kept saying yes. Yes, you qualify. Yes, you're accepted. Yes, we want you. I wasn't used to yes. I broke off the engagement the day I got my acceptance letter to officer candidate school. Michael was confused more than hurt. "I thought we had a plan," he said. "We did, but it was never my plan. It was just the plan that required the least courage." My mother cried. My father didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. When he finally did, it was to tell me I was making a mistake, that I was too old, too soft, that I'd never make it. "You don't have what it takes," he said. "You never did." I shipped out to Newport, Rhode Island, 2 months later. I was 28 years old. Officer candidate school broke me down in ways I didn't know I could break. 5 a.m. wake-ups, physical training until your muscles screamed, navigation classes, leadership courses, memorizing rank structures, naval history, protocol. But here, they do tell you about military training. It doesn't just build strength. It builds clarity. Every morning when we stood at attention, when we ran until our lungs burned, when we practiced making decisions under pressure, I felt myself becoming someone I recognized. Not someone new. Someone I'd been all along, buried under years of trying to be what others needed. I graduated 17th out of 63 candidates. My mother came to the commissioning ceremony. My father didn't. She took pictures, cried, told me I looked beautiful in my uniform. I felt beautiful. Not because of how I looked, but because of who I'd become. I didn't know it yet, but the world was about to change. My first assignment was at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton. I worked in the ICU, 12-hour shifts. Combat injuries, training accidents, everything in between. The work was brutal and sacred. You hold someone's hand while they're dying, you learn what matters. And what doesn't? The people I worked with became my family in ways my blood family never had. We trusted each other with lives, with truth, with the parts of ourselves we couldn't show anyone else. I deployed twice, once to Djibouti, once to the Persian Gulf. In Djibouti, I treated Marines with heat injuries, dehydration, infections from wounds that wouldn't heal in the dust and heat. In the Gulf, I worked on a hospital ship, the USNS Comfort, treating sailors and civilians, performing surgeries in rooms that swayed with the ocean. I learned to suture while the floor moved beneath me. I learned to make impossible decisions with limited resources. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite it. I made lieutenant after 4 years. Lieutenant commander after 7. I was good at my job, better than good. I ran departments, trained new nurses, developed protocols that saved lives. I found out later that my evaluations used words like exceptional, innovative, natural leader. Words my father had never used, words I'd never believed could apply to me. But here's the thing about healing. It's not linear. You can be strong and still carry wounds. You can be successful and still hear that voice in your head telling you you're not enough. I'd been in the Navy for 11 years when I went home for what I thought would be a simple visit. My mother's birthday, just a weekend. My father was older now, slower. He'd retired. Spent his days in the garage, fixing things that didn't need fixing. I thought maybe time had softened him. Maybe seeing me in uniform, seeing what I'd accomplished, had changed something. That's when the grocery store happened. When my card was declined, when he called me useless in front of strangers. When I realized that no amount of accomplishment would ever be enough for him, because it was never about me, it was about him. His disappointment, his fear, his inability to see past his own expectations. I drove back to base that night instead of staying the weekend, cried for the first 2 hours, then stopped. Because crying wasn't going to change him. Nothing was going to change him. The only thing I could change was whether I let his voice become my truth. 3 months later, I was promoted to commander. It's a significant rank. Not the top, but high enough that people notice. High enough that you're shaping policy, leading large teams, representing the Navy in important spaces. My promotion ceremony was held at Naval Medical Center, San Diego. Officers in dress whites. The whole formal ritual of it. Reading of orders, exchanging of salutes, and then the reception afterward. That's when I saw him. Rear Admiral James Morrison, 2 stars. In charge of Navy Medicine West. I'd met him briefly before, at a conference, but never in a formal setting like this. He walked over to me and I came to attention. He smiled. At ease, Commander. Then he did something I'll never forget. He asked about my work. Not in that polite, obligatory way people sometimes do. He actually wanted to know about the trauma protocols I'd developed, about retention rates for Navy nurses, about what we needed to better serve our sailors. We talked for 20 minutes. At the end, he shook my hand and said, "The Navy is lucky to have you leading this work, Commander. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, Commander." Not honey, not sweetheart, not some diminished version of myself. Commander, a title I'd earned. A rank that represented 11 years of service, sacrifice, excellence. But that wasn't the moment. The moment came 2 weeks later. I was asked to present at a medical conference in Washington, D.C., big venue. Lots of senior officers. I was nervous. Public speaking had never been my strength. I preferred the quiet authority of the hospital ward, not the spotlight of a stage. But I'd prepared. I knew my material. I walked up to that podium in my service dress blues, looked out at an audience of maybe 300 people, and began to speak about combat casualty care. About innovations in battlefield medicine, about saving lives in impossible conditions. Halfway through, I saw him walk in. My father. My mother had mentioned the conference to him, apparently. Sent him the details. I don't know what possessed him to come. Curiosity, maybe. Or perhaps some part of him wanted to see if I'd fail. He sat in the back. I saw him, and for a moment my voice wavered, just for a second. Then I remembered something one of my instructors at OCS had told us. You don't speak for yourself. You speak for everyone who came before you and everyone who'll come after you. I finished my presentation. The applause was generous, professional. Then came the question and answer session. Admiral Morrison stood up. I recognized him immediately. My heart jumped. He asked a technical question about triage protocols in mass casualty events. I answered. He nodded, satisfied. Then he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Thank you, Commander. Your expertise is exactly what Navy medicine needs moving forward. Share this with someone who would understand." After the session, people wanted to talk, ask questions, exchange cards. My father waited by the door. When I finally made my way over, he looked different. Smaller, somehow. Older. He didn't apologize. Men like him rarely do. But he said, "I didn't know you did all this." I wanted to say, "You never asked." I wanted to say, "I tried to tell you." I wanted to say so many things. Instead, I just said, "Now you do." We stood there in silence for a moment. Then he left. That was the last time we spoke about my career. He died 2 years later. Heart attack. Sudden. At his funeral, his colleagues talked about what a brilliant engineer he'd been, how he could solve any problem, how dedicated he was to his work. I sat there thinking about all the problems he couldn't solve, all the distances he couldn't bridge, all the words he couldn't say. I don't hate him. I did for a while. But hate takes energy, and I needed that energy for other things, for my patients. For my sailors, for myself. I've come to understand that hurt people. Whatever made him so hard, so critical, so unable to see me, it started long before I was born. I was just the latest person to stand in the blast radius. I'm a captain now. Oh 06. It took me 18 years to get here, but I made it. Run a major naval hospital. I have hundreds of people under my command. Doctors, nurses, corpsmen, administrative staff. I make decisions that affect thousands of lives. And every single day I think about that 8-year-old girl who brought home a 94 on a math test and was asked about the 6 missing points. I think about the 32-year-old woman standing in a grocery store, holding a declined card, shrinking under her father's words. I think about all the versions of myself who believed I wasn't enough, and then I look at my uniform, at the rank on my shoulders, at the ribbons on my chest that represent years of service, deployments, achievements. I look at the young nurses I mentor, especially the ones who seem unsure, who seem like they read trying to make themselves smaller to fit into spaces that don't want them. I tell them what I wish someone had told me earlier. You are not the worst thing anyone ever said about you. You are not the disappointment in someone else's eyes. You are not the person who failed to meet impossible standards. You are who you choose to become. Every single day through your actions, your integrity, your refusal to give up. The Admiral didn't give me my worth. The uniform didn't give me my worth. The rank didn't give me my worth. They just reflected what was already there, what had always been there, buried under years of other people's expectations. I gave myself my worth. By showing up. By trying. By refusing to accept that useless was my truth. I still think about that grocery store sometimes. About standing there with that declined card, feeling the world shrink around me. But now, when I think about it, I also think about what came after. About every patient I've saved. Every sailor I've led. Every protocol I've developed that's made care better, faster, more compassionate. About standing on stages and in conference rooms and hospital wards, not as someone's disappointing daughter, but as commander, as captain, as a leader who earned her place. Respect does not erase the past. It simply teaches us how to breathe again. It doesn't delete the wounds. It doesn't rewrite history, but it changes the light. It shows you that the person who hurt you, who diminished you, who made you feel small, they don't get to write the end of your story. You do. I wish I could tell you that my father eventually saw me, really saw me. That we had some beautiful reconciliation before he died, but that's not my story. My story is about learning that I didn't need his approval to approve of myself. I didn't need his pride to be proud of who I'd become. I didn't need his voice to tell me I was enough because I'd found my own voice and it was stronger than I ever imagined. If you're carrying someone's words like stones in your pocket, words that make you feel less than, words that shrink you down, I want you to know something. Those words are not prophecy. They're just words. Painful. Yes. Heavy. Absolutely. But not truth. Truth is what you do when no one's watching. Truth is how you treat people. Truth is whether you kept going when everything told you to stop. Truth is the person you see in the mirror when you strip away everyone else's expectations. I'm 50 years old now. I've served 22 years in the United States Navy. I've held the hands of dying Marines. I've delivered babies in field hospitals. I've led teams through impossible situations. I've made decisions that saved lives and decisions that still keep me awake at night. I've been scared and brave, sometimes in the same breath. I've been broken and whole, often simultaneously. I've been called commander by admirals and daughter by a father who never understood me. And if I could go back to that grocery store, to that 32-year-old woman holding a declined card and shrinking under her father's words, I would tell her, this moment doesn't define you, his words don't define you. Your worth isn't in that card or in his approval. Your worth is in who you're becoming, even when you can't see it yet. Especially when you can't see it yet. Keep going. It's all going to mean something. Truth does not shout. It simply waits to be heard. If stories like this remind you what dignity feels like, subscribe. You belong here. And don't miss the next story. It is something truly unforgettable.